What started as a grassroots community experiment using add-ons and an honor system has become one of the most significant success stories in classic WoW's history. It brought tons of players back to the game, created viral moments that have spread far beyond just World of Warcraft, and fundamentally changed how thousands of players experienced Azeroth. But now standing at the edge of 2026 with Naxxramas cleared and the Burning Crusade on the horizon, hardcore WoW's community faces the biggest question yet. What happens to hardcore when we cross the Dark Portal? Well, the answer may not be what you think, because whether Blizzard officially supports it or not, hardcore TBC is going to happen, and when it does, it's going to be absolutely crazy. This is the story of hardcore WoW and why the Burning Crusade is going to be the big next step for it. But before we go on, a quick word from today's sponsor, Sword of Justice Online. Sword of Justice is a brand new next-generation mobile MMORPG that just launched its open beta. First up, this is console quality, but on mobile. The visuals are exceptional, with cinematic-level graphics that rival what you'd expect from AAA PC titles. The open-world exploration is also completely unrestricted, meaning you can traverse the landscape with parkour mechanics and discover hidden content without having artificial boundaries. What really sets Sword of Justice apart though is the path convergence system combined with their genuinely fair monetization. Your character's progression isn't locked to one playstyle, so whether you prefer solo content, dungeons, PvP, or even life skills and professions, you're all advancing at the same rate. And here's the key takeaway: combat power and resources come purely from gameplay. You can't buy stats, and monetization is strictly limited to cosmetics. There is also AI technology here as well to enhance the gameplay. NPCs have actual memories and personalities, and if you prefer playing solo, the AI teammate system will match you with intelligent companions that genuinely know how to run dungeons effectively with how you enjoy playing. The character customization is also deep, with high precision creation tools and extensive cosmetic options that don't tie into pay-to-win mechanics. Sword of Justice's open beta is now available, so check out the link in the description and start your journey today. Many thanks to Sword of Justice for the sponsor today. Let's get on back to WoW. Let's go back to 2022. Wrath of the Lich King Classic had just come out and everything was looking amazing. Players were coming back in droves, ready to experience what many considered to be the peak of World of Warcraft's golden age. But as we got there and playing through it, things didn't quite always measure up to expectations. The classes started to feel dramatically different, and some of those raids were beginning to be quite challenging as well. Perhaps it was just rose-tinted nostalgia of a different time, but things had definitely moved more than many people had anticipated during this expansion, and the streamlined convenience of Wrath systems, which had been celebrated back in 2008, now felt as though it was stripping away something more fundamental from the game. And so inevitably, people started looking once again back to vanilla, the simpler times, a place that had already been many times over, but one that it always felt right to go back to. And that's when this different way of playing World of Warcraft really started to take off in hardcore. It was on two servers in particular, Bloodsail Buccaneers in North America and Hydraxian Waterlords in Europe. It was a movement taking shape. Players had started what was then an unofficial challenge: create a character, install the classic hardcore add-on, and try to reach level 60 without dying. Of course, a single death meant you deleted your character and you had to start all over again from level 1. Back then, the whole system ran on trust and an honor code. You had to be honest about your deaths. Not everyone was, of course. There was no official enforcement, no Blizzard oversight, just the community and the add-on holding you accountable. And this meant there were things such as griefing back then too. Non-hardcore players could mess about with your runs, and it wasn't a perfect system, but you know what? The community back then really didn't care about perfection because it was just such a fun time to be playing. They cared about the challenge and proving they could do it, and about finding a rush in the genuine risk of the open world that modern WoW had polished away. There was the Deathlog add-on too that became legendary in its own right. Every time a hardcore character died, it would broadcast this to everyone else with the add-on. You'd see their name, their level, what killed them, where they died, and most importantly, their last words. And the last words feature was one of the absolute most important things about this add-on. Seeing someone say you can fall into water from here and then they die from falling, you just can't make that stuff up. It's poetry really. But beneath the entertainment value, hardcore hardcore was doing something more significant too. It was changing how people played World of Warcraft. There was no rushing to the endgame anymore, no boosting through dungeons, no treating the leveling experience as though it's an obstacle between you and the real game. Every quest became meaningful and felt as though it mattered. You had to think before you started to pull multiple enemies, and the decision to team up or not with other players became a choice that you had to make. Because of this, you built more real relationships than you would typically do. A bad tank could easily overpull and get your character killed. A mage who sends AoE straight at the start of a pull could cause a wipe, and a healer with a bad internet connection was just a disaster waiting to happen. So you would find good players and guilds and you would stick with them. You'd remember their name, you'd add them to your friend list, and you'd build whole new communities around the hardcore playstyle. Even veteran players who thought they knew vanilla inside out were discovering that they didn't, in fact, know it all. Sure, people would remember quests and zones, but did you remember exactly which mobs hit bizarrely hard for some reason? Which elite areas to avoid at certain levels? Where are their patrols? Where are their stealthed mobs? Classic has always seemed like a really simple game, but there's actually quite a lot of depth to it. And by early 2023, hardcore wasn't just popular, it had become a phenomenon. It felt as though it was the main way to play World of Warcraft for a period of time. There was always people talking about it and sharing clips, be it on Reddit or YouTube, tons of big streamers on Twitch, both from World of Warcraft and from outside of World of Warcraft trying out this challenge too. And something else that really mattered was the barrier to entry being so low. You didn't need to be in a top guild, you didn't need perfect gear or years of experience, you just needed to make a character and give it a go. So from veteran players to entirely new ones, this was a challenge friendly to everybody. And as easy as vanilla seems, and everyone really does make it out to be the most simple version of the game ever, at the same time a tiny percentage of the player base would make it to maximum level. On average, it was around 1 to 2% of people actually trying the challenge and starting a new character who actually achieved level 60, which paints the larger picture that, in fact, this was rather challenging to do, purely because of the amount of time you had to level through, and the fact that vanilla has always been a game which really challenges your game knowledge, more so than being super skill based. But that's something that made hardcore so fun, because you were always learning something, and after that initial shock of having your character die, you do want to try again, be it on the same class, or maybe this time around you'll pick something new and get a little bit further. It's that one more run compulsion that so many great games capture, but here it's amplified by having genuine stakes within the game. You're not just losing rounds or resetting to your last checkpoint, you're going all the way back to level 1, and as much as that can hurt, it is fun to always go again. Back when hardcore first started gaining momentum, there was a debate in the community about how far this thing could actually go. Sure, level 60 on hardcore was comparatively already impressive. Getting a character raid ready without dying was a genuine accomplishment, but actually raiding, imagine taking 40 people into Molten Core where any mistake could potentially wipe out hundreds or thousands of hours of invested time. Would people really be able to do that? It did seem like a bridge too far, and there were reasonable arguments against it. Raiding in vanilla required coordination between a lot of different people. One person tabbing to the wrong set of enemies and pulling them could easily lead to a wipe. Again, it's just like leveling. Things all seem very easy, but in many classic raids, you may feel as though you're one-shotting everything, but then again, everything can one-shot you right back. But hardcore players would prove doubters wrong, and during the Road to Ragnaros event, a guild Frontier would assemble a full 40-player raid, venture into Molten Core, and clear the entire raid. And from there the floodgates opened, and guilds went from success to success in hardcore raiding. Blackwing Lair was cleared, AQ40 was cleared, and even Naxxramas sometime later. In fact, even very recently, Frontier has gone back into Naxxramas and cleared it again without even using world buffs. And world buffs can easily contribute somewhere around 30% of your damage, on top of giving you tons more mana and health. Your average guild on Anniversary playing the game regularly would still struggle to clear the last two bosses, Sapphiron and Kel'Thuzad, without world buffs. To have done this on hardcore is nothing short of absolutely unreal. This is the absolute pinnacle challenge, the most difficult thing that you can possibly do in hardcore WoW. And throughout all this, Blizzard watched what was happening, and they realized that that they had to respond. The community had created something special, something that was bringing a massive amount of attention to Classic WoW, not just from Classic WoW players or streamers, but from people outside the community, and that was the important part. The hardcore streams were pulling in tens of thousands of viewers, death compilations on YouTube were going viral, and of course there was the OnlyFans Guild events bringing in a ton of different content creators from all across the internet more recently. Interestingly, Blizzard had experimented with hardcore before it got super popular. Season of Mastery, which launched way back in November 2021, included an optional hardcore toggle, and people were playing hardcore back then as well too. It just hadn't gained that much traction back then. It didn't really happen till midway through Wrath of the Lich King, but by mid-2023 the timing was very much perfect, and on August 24, 2023, Blizzard launched official Hardcore Realms, and for the first time ever we could play without the add-on and just get on with things. Blizzard did do some minor tweaks as well, such as certain quests not killing your character as they would usually do, escort NPCs got protection to prevent griefing, and a few other bits and pieces. These servers even got the Mat Gora, the duel to the death system where players could challenge one another, and the loser's character was permanently gone. Those were so fun to watch. Beyond that, in November of 2024, fresh Anniversary Realms launched too, including a dedicated Hardcore Anniversary Realm for each region. This gave players another chance to explore hardcore from day one, to be part of a fresh economy, to race for server first all again, and people showed up in force to go again, once again. Throughout this entire journey there, the community has really been the driving force. The big guild accomplishments, the viral death clips, the streaming content, and the guides and strategies shared online. All of it comes from players who are passionate about this game mode, and from something that started as an unofficial add-on with an honor system, hardcore has without a doubt become one of the biggest unexpected success stories of Classic WoW. Which brings us to right now, to this moment in late 2025, where Naxxramas has been out for months. Phase 6 was released in October, and players have been grinding Tier 3, collecting frost resistance gear, and pushing through Naxxramas once again. The Anniversary Realms at this point in time have once again concluded the vanilla journey, and everyone knows what happens next. The Burning Crusade Classic should be expected to launch around probably early 2026. As of doing this video, we still don't know, but that's an estimate. But when this happens, the Dark Portal will once again open and Outland will become available, and the question that's been hanging over the hardcore community for months will finally get an answer. What happens to hardcore when we enter the Burning Crusade? Now, there will always be a community that wants to stay in vanilla. Hardcore era realms will remain available for players who want that pure classic experience, but in terms of raiding and hardcore in vanilla, I feel as though that ground is pretty well covered at this point in time, because every raid has been cleared, every achievement has been earned, the peak challenges have been overcome, and yes, I expect hardcore vanilla to be replayed time and again for many years to come, but there are options here to at the same time do something different, for those who want to move forward and experience hardcore TBC through a brand new lens. What about those people? Well, here's the thing, we don't really need Blizzard to make TBC hardcore happen for TBC hardcore to be a thing. The community created hardcore in the first place. The community built the infrastructure around this system. The add-on is there, I'm sure it could be updated. All we need for TBC hardcore is a TBC server. That's really it. And the rest will just be up to the community to re-establish this way of playing the game in this whole new land. I fully expect that when Anniversary Realms progress to TBC, hardcore players will have the option to transfer to Era if they want to stay in vanilla. But for most, they'll probably be moving forwards into Outland. And here's hoping that Blizzard gives us an actual proper duration pre-patch this time, not the rush 2-week thing they did in TBC Classic back in 2021. Give us time to level them Blood Elves and Draenei, and some time to check out how hardcore really plays on a newer character at a lower level in TBC. Some time to prepare for what's coming. And you know what, I also think TBC would work very well for this style of game mode. TBC still maintains that classic WoW feeling. Yes, we are more powerful than we were in vanilla. Classes get important new abilities that round out their toolkits and make them feel more complete, but the core gameplay loop remains pretty familiar. You still need to plan your pulls, you still need to manage your resources, and you still face genuine danger when you venture into the wrong area or pull too many mobs. Once we get into Wrath and beyond, the game changes in a way which I don't think would mesh well with the hardcore philosophy. Everyone starts to get a DPS cooldown or a defensive cooldown, mobility, interrupts, and so on. And then we've got heirlooms too, which just allow you to overgear content and not care about leveling upgrades, and you will be able to spam the dungeon finder too and get gear from the reward bags from that. The power level just ramps up in a way that doesn't really fit with hardcore anymore, but TBC does still feel like an extension of vanilla. It does have some features which I don't think fit with hardcore too well, most namely flying, and you do have to fly to reach certain places in the game. But apart from that, TBC might be the sweet spot and the final expansion where hardcore really makes sense within World of Warcraft. But of course, talking about TBC hardcore and the possibility of it happening, we have to bring up leveling, and not just leveling through TBC and how that would be different, but leveling through the vanilla part of TBC. Would people really want to undergo all of this over again for a chance at leveling in Outland? Imagine the scenario: you've spent 2 weeks getting a character to level 60, you've been careful, you've been patient, made smart decisions, you finally hit level 60, you've got some decent gear, maybe a piece or two from dungeons, perhaps you found a rare in the open world. You cross through the Dark Portal, you zone into Hellfire Peninsula, start questing, and then Fel Reaver just pops along and sends you back to Elwyn. I mean, dying in regular hardcore is one thing, but I think there's going to be this feeling at the back of people's minds that TBC hardcore will really start once you cross the Dark Portal, and that 1 to 58 is going to be a bit of an obstacle. Dying is going to sting a lot more than it does already in ordinary hardcore. And I have gone back and forth on this a bit, but ultimately I think starting at level 1 just has to be part of the hardcore experience, because the game mode is fundamentally about the journey. If hypothetically you could start at level 58, it just wouldn't feel right, I don't think. You'd need Blizzard to officially implement this in some way, and you'd need all sorts of rules and extra bonuses for these characters. You'd need a set of template gear, you'd need some template professions, and people would absolutely grief with these pre-level characters. A good thing about the true hardcore servers is that you can't have ordinary players just messing about with you. Everyone's life is on the line equally, and if you started at 58, we would go back to people griefing again, which isn't much good either. And there's something else to consider here, because TBC actually made leveling through vanilla quite a bit faster. So in patch 2.3, Blizzard implemented changes to the vanilla leveling experience designed specifically to help players reach Outland faster. Overall, we're looking at about 700,000 experience less needed to go from 1 to 60, which works out at about a 17% reduction. But the changes went beyond just requiring less experience. Quest rewards from levels 30 to 60 were buffed substantially, and elite quests in particular received huge increases, with some quests rewarding up to 40% more than they would have before. I've looked up a few examples here. Leaders of the Fang, a low-level quest from Wailing Caverns, went from 2,200 to 2,600. Troll Witchery, a quest in STB where you have to collect bits and pieces from trolls. There's about half a dozen quests like this, but this one went from 3,150 XP to 4,350. Big Game Hunter went from 5,350 XP all the way up to 7,550. And once you're in your levels 40 to 50s, quests consistently give around 40% more XP than they used to. These aren't just minor tweaks, these are pretty significant increases. Beyond this, quest rewards and dungeon gear also, for the most part, got reworks. You have items such as Robes of Aragorn from Shadowfang Keep that received significant stat improvements. On top of that, elite zones such as Stromgarde or Jinfra Lore were de-elited, so they're just regular mobs and you could go and do them solo now and not have to worry about them being too dangerous. So there is still going to be a grind there, don't misinterpret it. You're going to be investing some serious time to reach 60, but it's going to be noticeably faster than things were in vanilla, and once you do reach Outland, the XP required between 60 and 70 is still about 6 million, so there's going to be plenty of leveling content left over for you. But imagine you have achieved it, you're now level 60 on vanilla and you're ready to cross the Dark Portal. What is that going to be like? Well, the first time you zone into Hellfire Peninsula is going to be pretty terrifying, to be honest. You'll have spent a good amount of time getting to this point. Chances are the motions you've gone through to get to level 60 are zones and quests that you understand, that you've seen videos about. But now in Outland, your knowledge is going to be tested all over again. Your gear probably isn't going to be that great unless you've been lucky with some drops here and there, and those first few quests are going to remind you that even just non-elite mobs in Hellfire do a lot of damage. Outland also introduces new challenges beyond just tougher mobs. You'll need to learn which profession items are now good in this new environment. Is engineering still as overpowered as ever? The answer is probably yes, because it always is, but just how good is it? There's so many new gear options to evaluate, and every class gets new abilities and talents that change how they play. And there is still a lot of elites scattered about. Do you know which elites are immune to stuns or slows? Because some of them are, and some of them aren't. How hard do they hit? What abilities do they use? Which mobs stun? Which ones have Mortal Strike? Do you know any of this stuff? Because all of these are kind of important to keeping your hardcore character alive. I also want to do a quick mention here somewhere to Flask of Petrification, or Petri Flask. So in hardcore, Petri Flask is the ultimate emergency button. You use it and it makes you immune to all effects for a minute, and typically people use it as a way to get out of instance content when they're going to wipe. You pop your Petri Flask, you leave a group, and then about 1 minute later you'll be teleported to where your Hearthstone is. There is an important difference in Petri Flasks in TBC, in that it now becomes a debuff instead of a buff. So you still get the 60 seconds of complete immunity, but once you use it, you're stuck in it for the full minute. You can't click it off and use another one to guarantee safety. That being said, it still very much is going to be a get out of jail free card for pretty much every single scenario, but I just thought I'll let you know about that little difference to a consumable that's become very controversial. Oh, and on top of that, the materials to actually make Petri Flasks get reduced massively. This happens to all the vanilla flasks, in fact, so it will become much easier to stock up on Petri Flasks. But people will understandably want that insurance policy in TBC, because the content, especially at level 70, starts to get way more difficult than things were in vanilla. So Heroic Dungeons in TBC Classic in 2021 launched on their pre-nerf values, and players who experienced that knew that they were absolutely brutal. There were trash packs which very often hit harder than bosses. You had to kite enemies through Blizzard or Frost Trap, and crowd control was something that started to come back to the game. Polymorph, Sap, Freezing Trap, Shackle, and so on and so forth. These dungeons were unforgiving in a way that players hadn't become used to. One bad pull could easily mean a wipe. One DPS who broke crowd control or veered off to the side and pulled another pack, that was you running out of the dungeon as fast as possible. And in lower levels of gear, these heroic dungeons were really challenging. For hardcore players, heroic dungeons are going to represent a completely new level of risk. You're not just dealing with tougher enemies, you're also dealing with the knowledge that comes with heroic mode, which enemies deal the most damage, which bosses have additional abilities, and so on. The community will have to develop entirely new strategies for handling this content. In vanilla, hardcore dungeons were risky, sure, but very much manageable. But ultimately, if you do want to raid, you have to do achievements, and if you want to do achievements, you have to do heroic dungeons. So this will be a progression path that the absolute top players will take, which brings us to the pinnacle of TBC content in hardcore: raiding. TBC hardcore raiding is going to be crazy. Let's start with what is the entry-level content. We've got Gruul and Magtheridon's Lair and Karazhan. On Magtheridon, of course, you need to click the cube at the exact right moment to interrupt his cast, and if you misclick too early, the amount of raid-wide damage the boss will do will pretty much guaranteed wipe your raid. This is going to be a moment where everyone petries, by the way. On High King Morgar, the pull at the start of the fight has always been so sketchy. If something goes even a little bit wrong, somebody can die. And on Gruul, sometimes he places a bunch of people people next to each other with shatter? Will you have enough time to get away from each other, or will you just end up one-shotting each other? And can you imagine doing Nightbane for the first time on hardcore? The amount of damage the tank takes is seriously scary. And then of course we have tier 5, tier 6 and beyond. And whenever TBC hardcore rating's brought up, there are two fights in particular which I feel as though need addressing. We've got Terran Gorefiend in Black Temple and Azulagor in Mount Hyjal. Both of these bosses have abilities which pretty much one-shot your character and will guaranteed kill you. Terran Gorefiend uses Shadow of Death, which kills you after 55 seconds, and Azulagor casts Doom, which kills you after 20 seconds. But I don't really see how these are entirely different from what Burning Adrenaline is during the Veil Straz fight in BWL, because both of these abilities do have a delay before they actually outright kill you. The question is, similar to Burning Adrenaline, can you just Hearthstone out and it's not a problem anymore? I mean, after the infamous corrupted blood incident in Zul'Gurub way back in the day, Blizzard implemented a system where raid debuffs are automatically removed when you Hearth. And yes, I know what you're gonna say, Burning Adrenaline makes Hearthstone instant, I do realise that, but when you're in combat, there's nothing stopping you from pressing Hearthstone. As long as you're not hit with a direct attack, the channel will still go through. What about Petri Flask? Do these abilities still kill through Petri? Who wants to try that one out for science? But honestly, these raid concerns I think are a bit overblown, and people are bringing them up as though they're a super big problem, when in reality, how many people are going to get to Outland? About 5% of the player base, maybe less than that, and then 1% of that 5% will ever even look inside of a raid. On top of that, these mechanics from bosses we're discussing in Terran Gorefiend and Azulagor are both from tier 6. That implies you would have completed the achievements in tier 5, which means you've defeated Lady Vash and Kael'thas Sunstrider pre-nerf on hardcore. So yeah, I can understand these bosses are issues, but they're so far away from actually being a relevant concern that, yeah, maybe it's not that big of a deal. And honestly, regardless of how far the raiding scene progresses, it's gonna create incredible content either way. Imagine seeing the first Karazhan clear, does the bow drop, the first Lady Vash kill, the first player to get Warglaives on a hardcore character, and imagine if they push all the way through and complete Kill Jaden. I want to say, would it even be possible? I'm sure it would be, but that would be an incredible achievement. All in all, I think TBC hardcore is coming. It's not speculation, it's an inevitability. Whether Blizzard decides to officially support it or whether it's left in the hands of the community, when TBC pre-patch happens, TBC hardcore happens, and I'm genuinely excited to try it. Playing through TBC again normally, I mean, that's fine, I've done it twice in 2007 and 2021, but playing through TBC with permanent death hanging over every decision, with every quest having actual stakes, with content that I don't know completely inside out, that is a genuinely exciting prospect to revisit. In any event, the next big thing I'm waiting for is Classic Plus, and Blizzard are still giving us the silent treatment on that one, probably not getting any significant news till BlizzCon 2026. So why not try playing TBC in a slightly different way and experiencing something entirely new in the meantime? Again, the community that built hardcore from the ground is one of the greatest success stories of Classic WoW. The players made a game mode that brought so many people back to Azeroth and made so many memorable moments and content. It proves that even a game as old as this still can be enjoyed in brand new ways, which means once again we are unfortunately in a position where we are waiting. The Dark Portal looms ahead. Outland is there with all its dangers and challenges, and I'm sure thousands of hardcore players across the world are ready to jump into this new experience. The real question isn't whether TBC hardcore will happen, it's just how far will people be able to get when it does. All in all, we won't know till we try, and that for me makes this very exciting. So Blizzard, all we really need is that TBC pre-patch to go live now, whether it's on hardcore or not. Give us some time to level, some time to prepare, some time to organize ourselves. And then when that Dark Portal opens, the hardcore players will do what they do best. Level, push, fail, and go again. What do you reckon though? Would you be interested in TBC hardcore and giving it a go? Let me know in the comments down below. And as always, thank you all so much for watching and listening in, and I'll see you all in the next one very soon.